Horror has, by far, the worst batting average out of any genre in video game history. I can confidently say, as someone who actively seeks out and sifts through bargain bin horror titles, about 80% of them end up being pure garbage. It's usually something thrown together in Unity for like $3, somehow made its way onto Steam, has probably installed malware on my PC, and is not scary in the slightest. I do this frankly way too often. So often that I have to ask myself, why do I spend my hard-earned money and frugal free time playing something that clearly is only meant to waste both? Well, that's because every once in a while there will be a game like Signalis. Developed by Rose Engine, a studio that is made up entirely of two people, Signalis takes place in the far future, where humanity has reached out to colonize neighboring planets with replicas, human cyborgs that have sold their lives away to whatever corporation may own them. We play as Elster, a replica who, after spending decades flying through deep space, has crash-landed, with her crewmate missing. Signalis starts off innocent enough, just being a simple survival horror game fighting off corrupted robots. A very good survival horror game at that. The game is clunky in a way that benefits it, and makes Signalis stressful. Every single encounter with an enemy is a desperate struggle for survival, as you have to constantly weigh your resources against one another, with each new supply of ammo or health pack being a blessing, a curse, or often, depending on your situation, both. I know I'm pretty much just describing basic survival horror, but trust me, with the dumpster fires that I have played, making those systems work is skill. Making them good is a miracle, but Signalis, in my opinion, perfects them. With just these elements present, Signalis would be a good horror game, but what pushes it into being one of the best of its genre on the level of series like Resident Evil is the story. As you take Elster deeper and deeper, planet across planet, you unravel a galaxy-wide conspiracy that doesn't become clear over time but expands into an almost Lovecraftian scale. Something that is extremely hard to pull off, yet Signalis does it, all while balancing the nuanced, heartfelt character moments that will destroy you once you inevitably become attached. If you need any more convincing, just listen to the soundtrack and look at these visuals. Over the course of human history, from when we first started banging rocks together to putting a man on the moon, the greatest philosophers have gathered to answer questions. Questions that are rooted deep in our very existence. Such as, do we truly have free will? Is morality an objective concept? And what is the true meaning of life? But there's one question, one mystery that has had the brightest and best minds stumped. One question that when you bring it up anywhere, will have those around you arguing for days on end. That question being, why did the Beatles break up? I told you about strawberry fields. What else is left to say about the Beatles that hasn't already been said a million times? With the group's meteoric rise in the 60s, the four of them would transcend past the title of music legends to the status of industry gods. The Beatles would create their very own culture that would morph and change as they did. They had a run so well baked into history that every single person has come to their own conclusion as to why it ended. Was it their lack of a manager, overwhelming fame, money, or creative disagreements? Was it because of John Lennon's wife, Paul McCartney's bossiness, George Harrison's habit of jumping ship? Was it Ringo Starr? Nah, definitely not Ringo. Constant theories, testimony, and pointing fingers over the course of half a century would only further stoke the flames and muddy the waters. It seemed the answer would be lost to time, until 2019, when the Beatles' Get Back was released. A whopping 9 hours of edited down footage of the Beatles creating their final album over the course of 3 weeks, and only a month later would they go their separate ways. The status of godhood is almost entirely gone, and you're left watching four people who have grown up together, gone through experiences that only they themselves understand, who all no longer have the ability to connect with each other and jam as the Beatles. The Beatles face setback after setback as friendships get torn down and disagreements keep them apart. Yet, there's a certain happiness to it. Seeing one of the greatest albums ever made be forged by their desire to get one last thing out as the Beatles. culminating in the now iconic rooftop performance where, unannounced, they held their last concert together. It's a beautiful moment that makes the end of the Beatles feel no longer a series of questions, but a happy swan song. The bear is stressful, the bear is dirty, the bear is ugly, the bear is loud, and the bear rarely gives you a second to breathe. Oftentimes, it can be hard to watch as you see these characters hit rock bottom trying to get through the day. They argue, they yell, they fight, and sometimes they just sit in silence, not saying a single word. You feel like you are in the bear, in this restaurant, helping to keep the ship from sinking, like you're part of this dysfunctional and oftentimes delusional family. But all of that messiness gives way to some extremely sincere moments. Moments that, no matter how small, feel monumental thanks to some amazing acting from its cast. It's impossible to not feel proud as you watch the bear slowly get built up as the people around it change and become better. A few years ago, I stumbled upon this image. It was a list of classical, philosophical, and political books that ultra-smart Harvard kids, or at least kids who pretend to be smart, read. Metamorphosis by Kafka, Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, History of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, you get the picture. Though what intrigued me about this image was that it was not just a list of books, but a recommended reading guide for a certain show. The things that seemingly influenced the creator of the show the most in conception or development. A show that reflects the complex themes that are portrayed in these books, in turn giving its own, just as complex themes for the viewer to ponder and think on. The show in question was none other than Hunter x Hunter, the 2011 anime about a young boy setting off into the world to find his deadbeat father, along the way meeting friends, fighting bad guys, and partaking in national conflicts. This part of Hunter x Hunter always confused me, as people like to pin it as the smart people shonen that upends each and every trope those baby shows like Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Bleach bore you to death with. Since in my eyes, Hunter x Hunter was pretty generic itself. The anime's pacing was all over the place. Long-winded fights, the overloaded magic system, unnecessary characters, and arcs that can drag on way too long. Basically, almost any pitfall that a shonen series could have, Hunter x Hunter felt like it jumped in headfirst to me. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the show, but it just never stood out to me like its contemporaries did. Though because of relentless images like this one and people constantly ragging on me for my opinions, I decided to give Hunter x Hunter another go this year, but not the anime this time around, instead the manga, and holy moly, I was wrong. Every single problem I had with the series disappeared in a flick of Yoshihiro Togashi's pen. I love the way he constantly changes and melds his style from ultra cartoony to hyper-realistic in order to emphasize any point he wants to get across. I love how it's hard to tell where each arc ends since they all just flow into one another so well. I love the complicated yet understandable Nen system, allowing for some of the most white-knuckle battles I have ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Most of all, that recommended reading list, which honestly just might be a joke, I kind of get it now. There is a real nuance Togashi has when it comes to writing characters. A nuance that can be interpreted as anything and everything from societal commentary to philosophical answers about ourselves. Seeing our cast morph and change as Hunter x Hunter races along is fascinating to read, but that's just where the anime ends, as there's still so much material it never got to, such as the currently ongoing Succession War, a political battle where no one, and I mean no one, is safe from a tragic end. I'm so glad I re-examined Hunter x Hunter and now can only hope that Togashi gets to finish the series on his own terms. A lot of people say a lot of things about Naruto these days. All I hear nowadays is how it's mid, only carried about nostalgia, some fights just don't make sense, the ending is awful, villains are kind of a letdown, and what have you. Though there's one thing about Naruto that no one brings up anymore. One thing that defines the series, warts and all. And that is that Naruto rules. despite arguably being the most popular anime here in North America, I have never experienced Naruto until this year. I'll admit, having an almost entirely anime-dedicated channel, it was a real blind spot in my portfolio. I don't know why I've put it off for so long now, having read both of its big three contemporaries beforehand, but in a way I'm kind of glad I did. I don't think I would have been able to appreciate everything that Naruto is, its themes, its characters, its world, without first having seen what inspired Naruto and what it would go on to inspire. Naruto has transcended just being an anime. It's almost become an entire culture, and for good reason. For years, I've heard about how peak the Chunin exams, Sasuke retrieval, and Pain of Soul arcs were. Now, having read them, I can agree wholeheartedly. I don't know, I could spend hours talking about Naruto as a story, but it feels nice finally understanding Naruto, finally realizing why it's so cool. I hope that it continues to be that one series which shepherds in new fans of anime for forever to come.
James? Honey? Did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful.
Aren't you Maria?
If you want me to be.
Silent Hill 2 Remake is my favorite game that was released this year, bar none. So I guess you could say it's my game of the year. Bloober Team did an excellent job, revitalizing one of the best games ever made, faithfully bringing it not only to the modern day, but elevating Silent Hill 2 to the point where I prefer this remake to the original. Now, let's say you clipped out that last paragraph, traveled back in time about a year ago, played me those exact same words, and I would assume that A, I was kidnapped and held at gunpoint to read those off, B, I had a psychotic breakdown in the future and have become mentally insane, or C, you have replicated my voice for financial reasons. Well, there'd probably be a lot of other assumptions, but the point is that when the Silent Hill 2 remake was first revealed to the world, nothing about it looked remotely good, and I mean nothing. Every single trailer misunderstood what made Silent Hill 2 in any way, shape, or form. The studio behind it had a worse track record than a drunk driver, constantly missing with every single release. Worst of all, Silent Hill has been god-awful for almost 2 decades, with no sign of that changing anytime soon. I bought the Silent Hill 2 remake purely out of obligation to see how much farther Konami could sink this franchise into its grave. So imagine my shock when this game started off amazing and only got better and better and better and better with each new location, cutscene, puzzle, and boss fight. It took me about 20 hours to play through this game, not because it was that long, but because I just had to see everything. I had to check every window, analyze every metaphor, or learn whatever I could about these characters, just like I did years ago in the original. There are some that will argue and have argued that the new combat is ill-fitting of Silent Hill, since after all, James Sutherland is no Leon Kennedy or Chris Redfield. He's not an action hero that can go toe-to-toe with an entire world of monsters. Though I would argue that the remake understands this more than the original. I played through it on the hardest difficulty and was struggling to make it through, as every single encounter was a brutal game of survival. The remake is good at making you panic, making you mess up and throw yourself in a corner. So we spent pretty much the entire game constantly in that corner, fighting like hell during encounters and feeling a wave of relief when they were over. I don't want to go too far into Silent Hill 2, as I have no doubt that one day I will make a dedicated video on it, but if you're wondering if this game rules, it rules. After a long 2-year wait, Elden Ring's first and only DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, finally hit, and it hit like a meteor. I went into this thinking it would be a normal Souls expansion, maybe around 5 hours to complete, or 10 if I took my time. I didn't expect Shadow to just be Elden Ring 2, with new massive open world locations to get lost in for literal days, dungeons that just don't seem to have an end, massive towers that just keep going up and up, breathtaking new boss fights that will truly test your skill, and a wave of new story info that practically flips the lore on its head. FromSoft did it again, making one of those magical experiences that I won't forget as long as I live. Shadow of the Erdtree is more Elden Ring, something that I will never pass up on, and you shouldn't too if you haven't for some reason played it. Every few years there's this new fighting game that comes and grabs my attention. One that I end up loving so much that it motivates me to actually get good at it. The last time this happened was in 2021 with the release of Guilty Gear Strive. I was hoping that either last year's Street Fighter 6 or Mortal Kombat 1 would be those games, having been a huge fan of both series since I can remember. Though for some reason I bounced off both of them. They were great, one more so than the other, but didn't click with me like previous games for some reason. So I was surprised when I picked up Tekken 8, a series that I've never touched before, and it just instantly clicked with me. I had always avoided Tekken due to the 3D movement plane, 3-digit move lists, and complicated characters, but for some reason all of that just made sense once I held the controller in my hands. I naturally gravitated towards the sword-wielding, gun-brandishing, knife-playing, teleporting, and force-field deploying French special agent, Victor Chevalier. I wasted no time trying to make him look like Roronoa Zoro in Tekken 8's gift of a character customizer and went to work. While I wouldn't remotely consider myself good at the game yet, only having started playing a few months ago, I have that burning desire to get better and improve my skills and climb the ranks. No matter how pissed off I get, how many times I lose, for some reason Tekken 8 keeps bringing me back to give it another go. There is also the single player content, such as the massive story mode, which didn't do a whole lot for me as it did longtime fans. I still enjoyed it though, especially that final fight. I hope Tekken 8 continues to keep kicking for a long time, because I'm not done with it anytime soon. Here are 5 things that happen in one season of House MD. Dr. House fights off a zombified version of his staff with a axe cane. Dr. House receives news that his girlfriend is going to die from cancer. Dr. House and his boss are in a last stand against the Bolivian army. Dr. House's staff discovers that their teenage patient is a drug dealer. And lastly, Dr. House performs a dance choreographed musical act. Or shoot, sorry, did I say that this all happened in one season of House MD? No, I meant in a single episode. House MD follows the escapades of Dr. Gregory House, one of the best diagnosticians in the world who is not only known for his Vicodin addiction, but unorthodox ways of curing his patients. From the outside, House looks like a bizarre slapstick comedy, because it kind of is. But on the inside, you'll find a genuinely heartfelt show, with moments that will have you dying laughing, and the next questioning everything and everyone. It's a show that is not afraid to dissect otherwise touchy moral dilemmas, and despite going about it in rather crude ways, it gives each topic the respect they deserve. I don't want to say too much about House, because it's a journey that you just have to experience for yourself. I already made a video about this one, go watch it, link in the description. So instead I'll do a last minute swap out. Like the Silent Hill 2 remake, Metaphor Refantazio feels like an impossible game. Not because it's unexpectedly good or anything, it's made by Atlas after all, but because massive fantasy RPGs like this one just aren't made anymore. I considered them a relic of the past, only relegated to consoles like the PS2 and before. The elephant in the room being Final Fantasy, which, in my opinion, has been kind of having an identity crisis for the past 20 years. Metaphor knows what it wants to be, relying on systems from Atlas's past such as the beloved day-to-day Persona social elements, complete with its own set of skills and links. Though things are different this time around, as instead of the individual characters being the focus, the massive fantasy world is what comes into the forefront, with each bond being a conduit to view it from a different perspective. It feels like we're in a second coming of the fantasy genre, as I have no doubt the Metaphor will be the next big fantasy series, and I can't wait for that to be the case. The only reason I don't think it overtakes Silent Hill 2 as my game of the year is because I haven't finished it yet at the time of writing, but I'm pretty close to the end, and I have no doubt it'll stick to landing. After I watched Gurren Lagann for the first time this year, it felt like every other anime, every other manga I had experienced was nothing but build-up to Gurren Lagann. Like they were all just stepping stones for me to get to that final door that was this magnificent series. Once the credits rolled on that last episode, I realized that this anime immediately became my favorite of all time. I have no other words to say about the series, just watch it. Fear and Hunger is a game that is almost scary to recommend, because from a newcomer's glance, implying that I even remotely like a game as brutal, as punishing, as sadistic as Fear and Hunger makes me sound like a masochist. When I say this game is like Dark Souls, I don't simply mean because it's harder than your average video game. Dark Souls is fair. Dark Souls wants you to win. Fear and Hunger has no such compassion for the player. It barely even acknowledges your existence. You are just one of the countless victims the never-ending dungeon claims, and you are far from the last. Every single little mistake can ruin your playthrough. Accidentally step on a nail? Well, now your foot is infected. If you don't literally saw it off, you are going to die. Though now you have one less limb permanently. Spend too long in a fight? Well, the enemy has a move that will instantly kill one of your party members. If that member of your party doesn't have enough sanity, they will kill your entire crew. Every single step you take in Fear and Hunger is a mistake. A mistake that you will learn from, because when I say that this game is like Dark Souls, I mean that because of how good you can get at it. Just like in Dark Souls, certain characters, certain moves, and certain items allow you to skip massive sections of the game, to the point where I was able to beat Fear and Hunger in less than an hour on my 5th playthrough, compared to the 30 hours it took me on my first. Though that was after throwing my head at every single wall to find the tiniest little trick that would make a world of difference. But what I feel like doesn't get enough credit is the world of Fear and Hunger. It is so much fun to spend hours piecing together every little detail to find out what is really going on in these dungeons, why you're here, and if the ancient gods will ever let you leave. Quick disclaimer, this game has every single trigger warning imaginable, and at times it can be too edgy for its own good. Not even searchable by Steam's store page due to its content, and the only way I can put footage of it on YouTube is by using this censor mod. So if you're put off by almost anything really, I would find a good video essay on YouTube and stay away from it. But to those of you who are able to bear through, you will find one of the most rewarding video game experiences of all time. There's this label I give certain things I like to call progenitor media. Once you read a manga like Berserk or watch a show like Twin Peaks for the first time, you realize how pretty much almost everything else has just ripped one of these off. And I don't mean directly ripping it off. Yeah, no kidding, the super meter from Street Fighter 3 was taken from Street Fighter 2. I mean taking ideas, atmospheres, vibes, and characters to put your own spin on them. I mean, come on, how many depressed guys with big swords fighting evangelical dudes with long hair can there be? That's how I felt reading Dune for the first time this year, but times 1000, as everything I've ever liked could somehow be traced back to it. I felt like I had already read Dune, but at the same time I hadn't, since despite it being everywhere I looked, nothing has really been able to recapture what Dune is. The boundaries it pushes, the risks it takes, and the things it says and doesn't say about its characters. How pretty much everything that will happen in the novel is said to you near verbatim at the beginning, yet you keep reading to watch it all unfold and then fold right back up again. Even the Dune adaptations, which are very good by the way, and in many cases better than the book, still don't really replicate the almost intoxicating feel Dune gives off, which leads me to believe that almost nothing ever will be able to, and that's okay. Dune isn't for everybody. It's confusing, it's weird, going a bit too off the rails in later novels, so I would recommend to stick to the movies if you don't feel like diving into 900 pages. But those who do will find an experience so familiar, yet so unique at the same time. In Book 2 of the Song of Ice and Fire series, better known as the books Game of Thrones is based off, there is this red comet in the sky. In the city of King's Landing, the capital of sorts in Westeros, it is referred to as King Joffrey's Comet by the common folk, named after the newly crowned young boy. The queen tells Joffrey that the common folk see it as a sign of celebration for his new position, while in actuality they see the reddish color as an omen for war to come, in which their blood will be spilt for the rich. Far away in the castle of Riverrun, the comet is named by its inhabitants as Red Messenger, believing it will signify their victory in the upcoming violence. In Winterfell, the home of House Stark, whose famous words, "Winter is coming," called the comet the sword that slays the season, believing it to signal the end of summer. On Dragonstone, Melisandre, a witch from a dark, faraway land, tells people that the comet is from the flame of dragons who have been extinct for 100 years. At the edge of the world on The Wall, a 700-foot structure that was built thousands of years ago to keep out deadly magical creatures, named the comet Mormont's Torch. after their Lord Commander, who will be leading them into a massive expedition into the unknown, all the way in Essos, a continent separate from Westeros with much of it shrouded in mystery. The last surviving member of House Targaryen, Daenerys, believes that the comet is to be ushering in the power of a new world, one under her rule. This comet represents everything I love about A Song of Ice and Fire. Learning about all these viewpoints, different periods of time, different locations throughout the vast world that George R.R. Martin has built is a never-ending treat, as there is no one true protagonist in A Song of Ice and Fire, just different viewpoints of the story and how they think it should be told. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, I would highly recommend picking up the books because, my god, the best seasons never even come close to how amazing the books are. The only reason that they aren't at number 1 on this list is because I'm not quite finished with them. About halfway through the 4th book to be precise, though I feel like I deserve some slack since the series has more pages than the entire Lord of the Rings series and the Bible combined twice. But once you dive in, it's hard to come back out. Despite being almost 3 decades old, it feels like video games haven't caught up to Metal Gear Solid, and I don't think that they ever will. It's an idea that is near impossible to describe to someone who hasn't played these games. From the outside, MGS looks old, like it plays clunky, it sounds cheesy, the fourth wall breaks off-putting, the story too complicated for its own good. That's at least what I assumed about these games, but I couldn't have been more wrong if I tried. From a gameplay perspective, these are the best stealth games ever made, using every single one of your tools to dispose of the enemy without being noticed. But where Metal Gear truly shines is in its storytelling. 40-minute long cutscenes can sound extremely bloated, but they're not, they're just captivating. Every single twist and turn manages to flip the series completely on its head, keeping every second just as unpredictable as the last. Again, it's hard to put into words the genius of these games, so just please, go and play the first one, since if everything goes according to plan, this will be far from the last time I talk about this series. That's it for my list, thanks for watching. This is a video I've been wanting to make all year now, and hopefully I can make it again every year, since it's quite fun to put together. Before we go, I just wanted to say thank you for the overwhelming support over the past year. This time a year ago, this channel had finally reached 1,000 subscribers, and now we have almost quintupled that only 365 days later. So again, thank you for everything. I hope you enjoyed the video.